What is the Balkans? The Balkans is also called the Balkan Peninsula. It is area in Southeast Europe. There was never a country called Balkans. Balkan and Baltic are not the same. Foreigners often mix up Balkan and Baltic. The Balkans is named after the Balkan Mountains. The Balkan Mountains is a mountain chain. The problem is that Balkan Mountains are only in Serbia and Bulgaria. Then why did whole peninsula got its name from the Balkan Mountains? Well, foreigners who visited the area wrongly assumed that the Balkan Mountains are bigger than they actually are. Fun fact, the Balkan Mountains are called Stara Planina in both Serbian and Bulgarian. Stara Planina means old mountain in English. The word Balkan comes from Turkish language and it means chain of wooded mountains. In ancient times, the area was called Hemus. In Greek mythology, Thracian king Hemus was turned into a mountain by Zeus. You will find the name Hemus on many medieval maps of Europe. The name Balkan first appears in 14th century Arab map. Arabs were known for loving geography and making maps. In Europe, the name Balkan was first used in 1490 letter to Pope Innocent VIII. Ottoman documents first mentioned Balkan in 1565. The concept of the Balkan Peninsula was created by German geographer August Zoin in 1808. Modern geographers reject the idea of Balkan Peninsula. They believe that Balkans is not real peninsula due to technical definition of the term. In case of real peninsula, the water border must be longer than land border. This is true for Apennine Peninsula, for example. The Balkans have large land borders. However, Balkan is still listed as peninsula by many sources. How big is the Balkans? Scholars cannot agree which territories should count as part of the Balkans. It ranges from 470,000 square kilometers, 181,000 square miles, to 790,000 square kilometers, 305,000 square miles. Countries like Brazil, Argentina, Algeria, Egypt are all bigger than the whole Balkans. It is estimated that 60 million people live in the Balkan countries, 45 million on the actual peninsula. Which countries belong to the Balkans? The question seems simple, but the answer is complicated. The Balkan Peninsula doesn't have fixed borders in the west and in the north. The south and east borders are the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. Some claim that River Danube is northern border of the Balkans. Many Slovenes and Croats claim their countries do not belong to the Balkans. But Slovenia and Croatia are listed as Balkan countries by many foreigners. Tiny part of Italy belongs to the Balkans and thus Italy can be listed as Balkan country. This also applies to Turkey. When I went to school, we never listed Moldova as the Balkan country. But in recent years, I saw maps of the Balkans that included Moldova. When talking about the Balkans, many foreigners exclude Greece. I think the reason is the prejudice they have against the Balkans. Greece is seen as the cradle of European civilization. Then how can Greece belong to the uncivilized Balkans? Balkan is often used as synonym for wild, savage, barbarian. The new word Balkanization entered English language. Balkanization is the fragmentation of a larger region or the state into smaller regions and states. The list of Balkan countries includes former Yugoslavia, Albania, Greece, Romania, and Bulgaria. Some include Moldova, Turkey, or even Hungary. It is said that Hungary is not a Balkan country in geographical sense, but that Hungary is part of Balkan political sphere. Personally, I wouldn't count Hungary as Balkan country. If we count Hungary as Balkan country, then we should add Austria too. Soon we would end up claiming that the whole Europe is actually the Balkans. This would be ridiculous. Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek explained where the Balkans begin. For Croats, it begins with the Orthodox despotic Byzantine Serbia, against which Croatia defends the values of democratic Western civilization. For Slovenes, it begins with Croatia, and we Slovenes are the last outpost of the peaceful Mitteleuropa. Side note, German word Mitteleuropa refers to Middle Europe or Central Europe. For Italians and Austrians, it begins with Slovenia, where the reign of the Slavic hordes starts. For Germans, Austria itself is already tainted by Balkanic corruption and inefficiency. For some arrogant Frenchmen, Germany is associated with the Balkanian Eastern savagery. I disagree with Žižek only about how Serbs think. Žižek, for Serbs it begins down there in Kosovo or Bosnia, and they defend the Christian civilization against the Europe's other. Though it is true that Serbs see themselves as defenders of the Christianity, Serbs also think that Serbia is a Balkan country. While Slovenes and Croats deny being Balkan nations and try to distance themselves from the Balkans, Serbs accept Balkan identity as a fact we cannot change. While the Balkans have pejorative meaning for Slovenes and Croats, Serbs are fine with the name. I wouldn't be offended if anyone describes me as a Balkan woman, because I am a woman from the Balkans. Foreigners should be careful about using the term Balkans because some nations are very touchy about it. For better understanding the situation, I would recommend the book Imagining the Balkans by Maria Todorova. Todorova is a Bulgarian historian. The book was published in USA in 1997. There are many translations of the book, including German, Italian, French. Todorova writes how foreigners see the Balkans as frozen in time. I completely agree with her. Foreigners visit the Balkans expecting to see horse carts and people wearing 19th century clothes. Some tourists are disappointed to discover that we do have electricity, internet, smartphones. I would say the Balkans is 10 years behind the West in technology. The good example is Netflix. Netflix started offering streaming services in 2007. Netflix became available in Serbia in 2016, 9 years after launching in USA. For some foreigners, Yugoslavia and Balkans became synonyms. This is absolutely wrong because Yugoslavia was just one of the Balkan countries. One will often hear about Balkan cuisine, Balkan culture, or Balkan mentality. I have no problem with these terms. Balkan countries share a surprising number of dishes. This becomes another point of discontent. Serbia is accused of stealing recipes from neighboring countries. But the thing is that Serbia never claimed ownership of these recipes. We know that burek doesn't originate from Serbia, but we love eating it. Burek or borek is a type of pie filled with either cheese or meat or spinach. Balkan mentality is also tricky to explain. Some foreign scholars believed that Balkan nations shared the same mentality. This is true to a certain point. How would I describe Balkan mentality? The perception is that average Balkan person is impulsive, violent, unsophisticated. The Balkans is no more violent than other places in the world. The only difference is that Balkan nations are very open about being enemies. There weren't more wars in the Balkans than in other places. Foreign journalists created false narrative about constant wars in the Balkans. The Balkans would have zero population if this was true. For example, Serbia had 59 years of peace between 1817 and 1876. Why do foreigners get the wrong impression? The Balkans usually had long periods of peace followed by several wars in quick succession. Also, Balkan nations are always aware of the possibility of new wars. Balkan nations love conspiracy theories and believe in the most ridiculous stories. Balkan nations are also obsessed with history. Serbs are often mocked for living in the past, but all Balkan nations do the same. Recently, I visited one online forum where people from ex-Yugoslavia discuss current events. The conversation went from the year 2022 to how Serbs helped Turks take Constantinople in 1453. Does this sound bizarre? Being bizarre is one of the Balkan characteristics. Hating the neighbors is another one. Balkan nations bask in the misery of their neighbors. Everything is fine as long as our neighbors are doing worse than us. Years ago, I watched one Croatian cable channel and the talk show was dedicated to the financial crisis in Croatia. But all they did was to talk about terrible financial situation in Serbia. Just to be clear, this was long after Yugoslavia vanished. Serbian and Croatian finances weren't connected anymore. Balkan people also base their theories on their feelings. One Croat online claimed how Bosnian Muslims and Serbs are working together against Croats. I don't know what type of drugs he uses, but I would say they are hallucinogenic. Is the Balkans a terrible place to live? No, there are much worse places in the world. Then why so many people are leaving the Balkans? The main problem is the proximity of rich European countries. Moving to Germany, Switzerland, France, Scandinavia is rather easy. They have great economies and great social care. Can one predict the future of the Balkans? I heard a dozen theories about the future and most are based on hunch. In recent years, foreign politicians introduced the term Western Balkans. It is the name used for Balkan countries that are not members of EU. Do Serbs use the term Western Balkans in everyday speech? No, most Serbs mock the term. Serbia is in the middle of the Balkans and cannot be Western or Eastern. A malicious person would say that Western Balkans is the name for EU rejects. I'm afraid that EU politicians will embrace the idea of creating a federation called Western Balkans. This would be another failed experiment like Yugoslavia was. I really hope this isn't true because I hate the idea of federations and unions. Yugoslavia proved that diversity doesn't work in the Balkans. There is also a question whether EU is ready to accept us. And if EU will still exist in 20 or 30 years. It is hard to predict what lies in the future of Western Balkans. Internet proved to be a blessing and a curse. Fake news are easily disproved, but they are also easily spread. Foreigners should be careful with the news coming from the Balkans. They are often blown out of proportions or crucial details are missing. For example, one Bosnian Muslim village called Gornja Maocha pledged alliance to ISIS. But Gornja Maocha only has 100 people. Although 100 people can cause trouble, they are more curiosity than a real threat to the world. Another problem is a language barrier. Many things are lost in translation. Should foreigners visit the Balkans? Foreign tourists usually have a good experience while visiting the Balkans. The Balkans has low crime rates when we are not at war. Most Balkan problems do not affect tourists. My advice to foreign tourists would be to read about the area they want to visit. Don't expect too exotic experience. You will find popular international brands all over the Balkans. If you suffer from severe food allergies, I would advise extra caution. Balkan nations do not follow strict guidelines, even when such guidelines exist. How would I describe the life in the Balkans? It can be very colorful and interesting, but also heartbreaking. But it is never boring.